Hi, this is Kim Reads Urantia. Good to be here. Yep. It's a cold day. But we're gonna read the Urantia book. First we got 365 Days of Walking the Red Road by Terry Jean. Today is January 9th. And we're gonna talk a little bit about Luther Standing Bear. He was it says in here he's a Oglala Sioux, but I Google him. He was a Sichango, and Oglala. Okay, so he's probably half. But he was a Lakota chief and Native American author, educator, and philosopher, and an actor. And he lived from 1868 to 1939. And he was born on the Rosebud Reservation, and that's a reservation that's important to me personally. I know some people there that are important to me. Okay, Luther Standing Bear. Let's see what he says. Civilization has been thrust upon me, and it has not added one whit to my love for truth, honesty, and generosity. Wow. Okay, so what do you qualify as civilization? What is civilization? This modernity, and it does some things for it. It makes our lives a lot more, makes a lot of material things available to us. It makes us saves time and convenience, and makes things easier in a lot of physical ways, but it doesn't add to our humanity, to our spirituality, to all the components that make us valuable to each other. Actually, it may take away from that most important aspects of our existence. So so that's important when we think about how much we've invested in convenience and consumerism and these things, and what has that cost us. So let's consider that today. Thank you, Luther Standing Bear. Also, we're remembering on this day in Native American history, January 9th, 1789, is the day the Treaty of Fort Harmar was signed. 1789. So this was kind of early in the history of the United States. And the Treaty of Fort Harmar covered the Great Lakes area, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota. And of course, this territory was ceded to Native American people, but of course we took back this territory from them. The Ohio area we took back in 1803. Indiana we took back in 1816. Illinois in 1818. Michigan 1837. Wisconsin 1848. And Minnesota 1858. Minnesota, this was revised. It says it was revised in 1818 convention and due to the Louisiana Purchase. But that's the gist of it. So it's never we can't hold our words for 20 years. 14 years. We let them have here this territory. We are I gotta quit saying we, because you know what, I've identifying myself with the American experience. I'm trying to more closely identify myself with a global, or just as a human being on this planet. All people are my people. So I have to say, I would say the American nation has been notoriously unable to keep promises to the Native American nations. Okay, this treaty held for 14 years before we broke those promises. Well, according to this is according, I'm getting my information from Wikipedia. Okay, so if you want to, I don't know, which, Wikipedia takes a beating, but I think it's honestly as good as a lot of the information out there, right? Ohio history, 1789. Okay, so this is another source. Did nothing to stop Treaty of Fort Harmar. Did nothing to stop the bloodshed between Americans and American Indians in the region. Beginning in 1790, so only 1 year, the American military decided to force the American Indians from the Ohio country. Warfare between the Americans and American Indian continued for the next several decades. So this beginning, but probably wasn't official until 1803. We hadn't officially reclaimed that or something. This is such a long and complicated history, and it's so tragic. It's so hard to weed through it. Treaty of Fort Harmar was kind of a okay. This is from the Ohio History Connection. So Ohio History Central. I'm just going to read through this. During the late 1780s, the Northwest Territory was a violent place as American settlers moved onto the land that American Indians claimed as their own. The United States government lacked the funds to equip an army to deal with the American Indian threat. Henry Knox, the Secretary of War, demanded that Arthur St. Clair, the governor of Northwest Territory, establish a peaceful relationship between the settlers and the natives. Governor St. Clair called for a meeting with the American Indian chiefs to negotiate an agreement. Okay, it makes you wonder, do they know this guy St. Clair? Does he know that he's bullshitting these natives? Sorry, I didn't mean to. American Indian leaders present included representatives from the Wyandot Nation, the Delaware Nations, the Ottawa Nation, the Chippewa Nation, the Potawatomi Nation, and Sauk Nation. American Indians hoped that St. Clair would agree to establish an American Indian reservation consisting of the land west of the Muskingum River and north of the Ohio River. St. Clair refused and demanded the chiefs agree to the reservation boundary established in the Treaty of Fort McIntosh in 1785. So this was kind of an extension of the Treaty of Fort McIntosh. St. Clair threatened the American Indians with attack if they refused and proceeded to bribe them with $3,000 in presents. The chiefs signed the Treaty of Fort Harmar, which reiterated the terms of Treaty of Fort McIntosh. Okay. The Treaty of Fort Harmar did nothing to stop the bloodshed between the Americans and American Indians. Many American Indians refused to honor the treaty, including the Shawnee. Okay, of course, then there's the great Tecumseh, who was Shawnee. They claimed that the tribes represented the treaty negotiations, did not speak for them, for the Shawnee. American Indian attacks on the white settlers in the Northeast Territory worsened following the treaty. St. Clair had failed to attain peace. Beginning in 1790, the American military decided to force the American Indians from the Ohio country. Warfare between the Americans and American Indian continued for the next several decades. Okay, so there you have that. Okay. I know at this point in time was around the time that Tecumseh brought a rebellion. Okay, we're going off on tangents. Tecumseh lived from 1768 to 1813. So that was right in there. He was Shawnee. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to stop there with that. Okay. And we're going to read from the Urantia book. Switching up gears here. The eternal and divine purpose. Okay. So here we are ending paper 32, the evolution of local universes. I have the eternal and divine purpose, section 5. Let's go. There is a great and glorious purpose in the march of the universes through space. All of your mortal struggling is not in vain. Isn't it good to hear that? I gotta hear that all the time because I'm going like, oh my gosh. No, I have to remind, that's like constantly. We are all part of an immense plan, a gigantic enterprise, and it is the vastness of the undertaking that renders it impossible to see very much of it at any one time and during any one life. We are all a part of an eternal project which the gods are supervising and outworking. The whole marvelous and universal mechanism moves on majestically through space to the music of the meter and the infinite thought and eternal purpose, the eternal purpose of the first great source and center. That is so comforting because everything just seems like it's just meaningless chaos. And that's what science has told us. And, that's really what, liberals complain about religious conservatives, but that's fundamentally, I believe, what they are fighting against. And that's a noble struggle. Of course, part and parcel, all these things that go along with it. But at the bottom, that sense of meaninglessness that goes with a secularly based non-spiritual worldview. That's what our religious conservatives are fighting against, and I respect that. Although the trappings that like devaluing science as a whole, but I'm not going to get into all this and women's rights and all the certain things, but sorting these things out is our struggle. Is our struggle. What struggles are we finding value in? What difficulties is there value in? Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, the eternal purpose of the eternal God is a high spiritual ideal. The events of time and the struggles of material existence are but the transient scaffolding which bridges over to the other side, to the promised land of spiritual reality and supernal existence. Of course, you mortals find it difficult to grasp the idea of an eternal purpose. You are virtually unable to comprehend the thought of eternity, something never beginning and never ending. Everything familiar to you has an end. So we are so limited by our nature. As regards an individual life, the duration of a realm, or the chronology of any connected series of events, it would seem that we are dealing with an isolated stretch of time. Everything seems to have a beginning and an end. And it would appear that a series of such experiences, lives, ages, or epochs, when successively arranged, constitutes a straightaway drive, an isolated event of time, flashing momentarily across the infinite face of eternity. Wow! Lives, ages, epochs. It seems like it's a straightaway drive, an isolated event of time flashing momentarily across the infinite face of eternity. God, what language they use. But when we look at all this from behind the scenes, a more comprehensive view and a more complete understanding suggests that such an explanation is inadequate, disconnected, and wholly unsuited properly to account for and otherwise to correlate the transactions of time with the underlying purposes and basic reactions of eternity. Okay, so this is, they're talking about nonlinear time. So we think of all this unfolding in this linear way as progressing toward something, but it's non-linear. So it's all reacting to itself and to the future and to the past, and it's all together. But that makes it seems like this mishmash of gobbledygook. But to believe that to see it this way, but still retain the faith that there is purpose in that, because I feel that, in order for us to perceive a purpose in creation, we want to see that linear progression. But that's only very temporal and a very limited perception, is what we have to remember, to see it as more than that. We have to go beyond the linear perception of time, which is such a challenge for us. To me, it seems more fitting, for purposes of explanation to the mortal mind, to conceive of eternity as a cycle and the eternal purpose as an endless circle. A cycle of eternity in some way synchronized with the transient material cycles of time. As regards the sectors of time connected with and forming a part of the cycle of eternity, we are forced to recognize that such temporary epochs are born, live, and die, just as the temporary beings of time are born, live, and die. Most human beings die because, having failed to achieve the spirit level of adjuster fusion, so we're talking about spiritual death here, the metamorphosis of death constitutes the only possible procedure whereby they may escape the fetters of time and the bonds of material creation, thereby being enabled to strike spiritual step with the progressive process of eternity. So if they're failed to achieve the spirit level of adjuster fusion, the metamorphosis of death constitutes the only possible procedure whereby they may escape the fetters of time and the bonds of material creation. So death is like liberation. thereby being enabled to strike spiritual step with the progressive procession of eternity. Having survived the trial life of time and material existence, it becomes possible for you to continue on in touch with, even as a part of eternity, swinging on forever with the worlds of space around the circle of the eternal ages. So we're perceiving a life, this progression in a spiral. So it's both a cyclical, something cyclical, and it's progressive in the way that it's always expanding. I feel that experientially we are expanding in the physical realm. Our knowledge is expansive, so it's cyclical and expanding. All the while, our spiritual experience is always falling inward. So the spiral is coming inward toward our core, our spiritual essence. So when we come to recognize that, that's the falling inward toward the center, toward the finding of God, because of course progression spiritually is from the outward spiritual universes in towards the center, towards heaven and toward paradise. So as we experience ourselves, we're letting go of the superfluous details of living the material experience and concentrating our power and our awareness on that inner power that's united with God, with our source of our being. Now, it's not that we're not aware of all this other stuff happening, but that's all. We don't identify with it. It doesn't mean anything to us. What's hardest for me is watching other people suffering. And I want to rescue them from this suffering, but most of the time it's what they need to go through in order to grow and to have their own spiritualized revelations and to adapt their own discovery and understanding. And to rescue them from that would be like trying to rescue the butterfly from the cocoon. And of course, you destroy it this way. That's a metaphor. So we make that mistake out of the best motives, but that's a mistake. So we're expanding it in one way and contracting in this other way. And the more we're able to discover, that's our own essence and our own power. So we become more powerful beings, and by our very presence, we are able to alert these other beings in distress about their hope, and give them direction and meaning just by our presence. We don't have to do anything. So we always want to do something. We always want to help. I mean, that's normal. But therein it goes the task is to inspire others to want to do things and accomplish for themselves. And who among us hasn't been just inspired by an exemplary being or human, or that teacher or that parent or a historical figure that is just upon that person what we want to be. But that's all very positive for us, and we need to allow people to do that. Yeah, by being just still and present with them. Okay. The sectors of time are like the flashes of personality in temporal form. They appear for a season, and then they are lost to human sight, only to reappear as new actors and continuing factors in the higher life of the endless swing around the eternal circle. Eternity can hardly be conceived as a straightaway drive in view of our belief in a delimited universe moving over a vast elongated circle around the central dwelling place of the universal Father. Frankly, eternity is incomprehensible to the finite mind of time. You simply cannot grasp it, you cannot comprehend it. I do not completely visualize it, and even if I did, it would be impossible for me to convey my concept to the human mind. So these angels, these high beings, these magnificent beings are saying, I don't really understand it. You cannot comprehend it. I don't completely visualize it. I don't get it really, but I'm trying to tell you. Nevertheless, I have done my best to portray something of our viewpoint, to tell you somewhat of our understanding of things eternal. I am endeavoring to aid you in the crystallization of your thoughts about these values, which are of infinite nature and eternal import. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that with me. There is in the mind of God a plan which embraces every creature of all his vast domains, and this plan is an eternal purpose of boundless opportunity, unlimited progress, and endless life. And the infinite treasures of such a matchless career are yours for the striving. The goal of eternity is ahead. The adventure of divinity attainment lies before you. The race for perfection is on. Whosoever will may enter, and certain victory will crown the efforts of every human being who will run the race of faith and trust, depending every step of the way on the leading of the indwelling adjuster and on the guidance of that good spirit of the universe Son, which so freely has been poured out upon all flesh. Presented by a mighty messenger, temporarily attached to the Supreme Council of Nebadon and assigned to this mission by Gabriel of Salvington. I want to be a mighty messenger maybe someday. I think that would be ultimately cool. Okay, I don't know. Maybe I'm not qualified to do that. No, that's a great idea. Anyway, okay, I'm going to let it go there. Tomorrow we'll start on paper 33, and Andy will be with us tomorrow, which will be lovely. Amy hasn't been with us. So prayers for Amy and her children. They have COVID at their house. So we'll say a prayer for them. And thank you for being with me. Okay. Have a good day. Stay warm. Bye.